something that began in 2010, and it was focusing on African brands around the time when the World Cup or the view of the world was focusing on Africa. And we wanted to really gauge on how African brands compare to international brands and see how they compete. And this is the 10th anniversary, and there's going to be a lot of talking that is going to be taking place this morning. And we, as an affiliate of Brand Africa, are really, really proud to be a part of this regional or Africa-wide and international research. Brand Africa is the foremost comprehensive survey and ranking, and it's an authoritative resource on brands in Africa. So we are going to be handing over to Thebe Ikalafeng, who is going to be speaking to us about the survey, about the dynamic and the matrix that are used in finding out how we come up with the top 100 list. And it also speaks to our country as well, how we came up with the matrix for the top 10. So Thebe, I'll hand over to you, and we welcome you all. Dumela.
Dumelang Botswana, dumelang ma-Africa, ke lebogile Losika, ke se bona ntse o tsenya letswai mo introduction ya gago. O maaka Losika o tla tronkong. But I'm excited to be in the world today in Botswana. And you may ask the question, why do brands matter so much? Why do we talk about brands so much? Well, brands matter because they provide us with a peace of mind. We are at peace when we understand the choices of brands. They help express who we are. They provide us with a sense of safety in a way. Make decision making very easy. They add value, and they help to create a difference, so we can distinguish ourselves. So we've started this journey, as you said correctly, Losika, in 2010 at the height of the World Cup. And as you said correctly, wanted to provide a metric to be able to really gauge how we do relative to brands. And the journey that we've decided to do then is to want to make sure that the methodology is tested, it is global, and it is beyond reproach. Didn't want Botswana ba re Thebonza dusumo calling letala tsa gage ba itlhopela gore ba rata efeng brand. So I wanted to make sure that the branding that the decisions that come out seem to be independent, objective, and they can stand any test. So to do this, we engaged two partners. So we engaged Geopol. Geopol is the largest mobile research company in the world, and we wanted Geopol because they have over 250 million access to over 250 million Africans who are on mobile across the continent. And we also engaged Kantar. And Kantar is the largest research company, and we wanted Kantar to help us to analyze this data. And you'll understand in a minute why we wanted them to do this. So why do you think we decided to go with mobile? We decided to go with mobile because there's over 747 million people with SIM cards in the continent. And almost half of them have got access to just a basic mobile with the basic mobile. But 33% of them have got a smartphone. But 87% of the connections in the continent will be by mobile in 2025. So mobile is really the vehicle that we need to use, that we can use, or that we will be using, that we're using now to be able to engage and to connect and to communicate across the world. So Geopol, as I've said, over 250 million subscribers. They do over 10 million interviews every year. And we did this because we wanted to make sure that, when we're doing this research, as you can see throughout the continent, they cover pretty much of the continent. We wanted to cover, and where they don't cover, our partners at Kantar can also augment that research. We do it via SMS and a mobile web, and we speak to respondents who are 18 years and older. Because we want to make sure that they are well-informed decisions about brands, and we're speaking to adults, if you will. We cover 27 countries. 27 countries. Now, what's interesting about these 27 countries, as you can see them there, is they represent 80% of the continent's population, over 80% of the population's continent, but also over 80% of the continent's GDP. So this is really, really, really comprehensive and all-encompassing. So while as one goes, you learn that every country is different, but broadly, if you want to do an Africa-wide scan, these countries cover pretty much the majority of the continent, cover every single region in the continent from east, west, center, south, east, west, center, south, north, and center. I get confused myself, and I've been to every single one of those 54 countries. 54, Losika, including 52. I don't know what happened to the other countries. I don't know whether you decided to get rid of the other countries. And 55 countries according to the African Union membership. Been to every single one of them. And it was also important for me to go to all those countries because as we're doing the research, I wanted to add a bit of context to what we've done, to what it means and these brands and how I see them. And when we do this research, we get an incredible amount of data. We asked them 3 questions. We asked them a question, we said, give us your top 3 brands. And you won't believe we get 15,000 individual brand mentions, 15,000. So we now have to deal through over 15,000 brands, and then we have to deal with the 3,000 different unique mentions. So other names will be duplicated in many ways. Then others, for example, in Botswana, you'll get somebody like Urban Soul and Mafia Soul, which will probably be the same thing. You'll get B Mobile or BTC, which come from the same. So you have a lot of those as well coming across.
The focus is on Thebe.
Losika, we can hear you. So how do we sort out all these brands? This is what we do. We ask Kenta, as I've spoken about, the biggest research company, to help us sort out these brands. And what Kenta does to create, to be able to make sense of all this, they put a weighted score to each brand, a weighted score to each brand, to each brand, to ensure that we are able to counter for the difference in populations. Because remember, a country like Nigeria has got almost 200 million people, a country like Namibia, Botswana, 2 million and under. So you can see it's quite a vast differentiation. So what we need to create a weighted average score which takes into account the sample and the population of each country that we cover. To make the top 100, the brands have to be recalled in at least one other country. So I'm going to go through the top 100 first before I go into the Botswana specific outcomes. So the 4 key areas that we ask them, give us any brand that you admire. We don't want to tell them African, local, global. We say nothing. The second thing that we narrow down and we ask them, what is your most admired African brand? So now we are prompting them. We're channeling their thinking. Then we ask them, what is your most admired financial services brand? And what's the most admired media brand? You may ask why we decided to bring in financial services and media, because those 2 categories, for some interesting reason, people don't tend to look at them as brands. They tend to look at them as necessary evils. So they always rank very low in the top 100. So we decided to isolate them so that we're able to focus specifically on those and try and understand what they mean. These are some of the highlights. This is what we've learned throughout the years, and most specifically this year, as well as I've said, over 15,000 mentions, over 3,000 unique brands. The first outcome, only 13% of the brands that Africans admire are African. Big challenge. Only 13% out of the top 100 brands that Africans admire are made in Africa. You can look at it as an opportunity or as a problem. Let's look at it as an opportunity. It means that the 87% opportunity for Africans to compete. So how and where do most of these brands come from? Nigeria, South Africa, and South Africa. And 85% of the top brand in every country is not African. Only a country like Tanzania, where Azam dominates, a country like Zimbabwe, where Econet dominates, Zambia, where Trade King dominates. Only 4 of the countries have got African brands. Then you go to Liberia. South Africa's brand is the top one there, compared to and not even if you go to a country like South Africa, you see that it's not MTN that you would have expected to dominate there. So quite an interesting one. Nike is the number 1 in South Africa. So this is what we've learned. Global brands are dominating, African brands are faltering. That is the key takeout. 13%, last year it was 14%, 10 years ago it was 34%. So you can see we've been faltering over time. We've stabilized over the last a few years at around 20% or so, but it's still quite a steep challenge. We know something. Football is key. Sponsors. So if you look at brands like Adidas and Nike, you understand why they begin to dominate the continent because they sponsor pretty much all the football and brands in the continent. Then you go to out of interest in Botswana. Kaizer Chiefs was one of the brands that came out. I was like, Kaizer Chiefs in Botswana from across the border. I was expecting a local team from Botswana to be a brand that's at mass. That's coming out of the list out of the Botswana. I'm going to come to the rankings in a minute. Then of course, then we come to the African identity. You know, we all wear these beautiful African-made brands, but you know, most of these fabrics come from Holland, not even made in made. So you go to West Africa, those beautiful fabrics that the West Africans are wearing, made in Holland. Then you come to us Leteisi. We even call it German print from Botswana. And I don't understand if we're Africans and we call it a German print. And then you go to Kenya, Kikoi, and Kikoi was created in Kenya, but now it's made in China. So you can see even that which we use to create an identity for ourselves is not even associated with us, or doesn't even come from us most of the time. So most of it is not made in Africa, all the way from Kenya, Ghana, Mozambique, and everywhere else. So some of the brands that are really dominating the continent, like Samsung, they have a specific focus and a strategy to build products for Africa. So that's what Samsung is so successful across the continent, because they've created specific products which are global standard but meet the needs of the continent. Then you get a brand like Guinness. I mean, Guinness is consumed more in Africa than in Ireland, where it comes from. So you can imagine the challenge there. Then you are seeing what technology is doing. And you know, with Mascom and everybody in Botswana as well, mobile money is the way. I mean, a brand like M-Pesa is now, it accounts for about 60-70% of the GDP of Kenya. In other words, the GDP goes through M-Pesa. Then with Tico Airtel Money or Tico Cash or mobile, MTN Momo. This, you know, what's interesting about the mobile brands is they are both financial services now, but they're also media brands. So it's quite interesting what we are learning every day. The telcos are just so much more than what we knew growing up with them. As I said, they see themselves as a media channels. They see themselves as financial services channels. And you go all the way up to Nigeria. You come across a brand called Innocent, which is sold in as far down as Mozambique. And they are making vehicles. Now I put it up because it's quite interesting, because we don't make cars in Africa, except in Uganda, where you've got the first electric car out of Africa, made at Makerere University, the Kira car. But Innocent is up and running. Makerere is still in development. Innocent is up and running. And like I said, we want to eradicate all foreign used automobiles from Africa. I think as Botswana, we can relate to what that means in terms of the cars that are coming through the borders from all other places, used cars that we buy. As you can see in Nigeria, he said, I am going to challenge that status quo. And then e-commerce is rising. I mean, you know, Jumia launched spectacularly last year on the New York Stock Exchange. This year, what was quite interesting is we then had Alibaba. Alibaba is not even in Africa, but it's in the top 100 most admired brands. But we know why, because Jack Ma is now, Jack Ma is helping during the COVID now. He's sponsoring an innovation award out of East Africa. So you can see what's happening, right? He's laying the foundation already for building a brand like Alibaba in Africa. You got Jumia, you got Amazon, Amazon and Jumia in the top. Amazon, Jumia, and Alibaba in the top 100 in the continent. Then, of course, other brands used to be ours, but they're not ours, but they are ours. like Tusker. They get bought by other foreign companies, just like SAB Miller was bought by InBev. Tusker was bought, East Africa Brewers Limited was bought by I think it's Guinness, I stand to be corrected. But we still look at those brands. We look at Castle, we look at Tusker as brands from our continent. Then you are seeing that there's rising African conglomerates. You look at Dangote. Dangote makes everything. You now understand why Dangote is so powerful in the continent. They make flour, they drill oil, they create cement to build, they do everything. Azam does the same similar thing in East Africa. So what Dangote is doing through West and most of the continent, Azam is doing in East Africa. They're making food, they've got television channels, they are the predominant brand in the continent. But you cannot take away anything from America. Most of the brands that we admire come from America, all made in the USA. And then we ask an interesting question. So when we ask the respondents, tell us your most admired African brands, you won't believe. 3 brands came out of that. We said, your most admired African brands. So out of that list, we went through the list. When we go through the list, we're like, Coke, Nike, Techno, among the top 10 brands, which are not even from the continent. Africans perceive them to be made in Africa, because a brand like Coca-Cola has been in the continent for 99 years. 99 years, and their distributions systems, their sales approach have always been about trying to, adjusted to speak to the environment. So you will not see the same way Coke is distributed in Johannesburg, in Gaborone, or in Cairo will not be the same way it's distributed in India or in other countries. So they've really tried to adjust to the countries where they do. They almost like are made in that country. Of course, Nike does, and is the other brand that Nike makes interesting things. That's why it's a dominant brand for the since it was number 9 in 2010, and it's now, it's been last 2 years in the run, has been number 1, including this year. So because they support people like Caster Semenya. They fight for the athletes' rights to do what they want. They also support the performing athletes like Eliud Kipchoge. They also look at people like Colin Kaepernick. Remember when they celebrated their 30 years of Just Do It, Colin was their face of the brand. Then they partner with influencers like Whiskey to create brands with them, that support their brands, which make the brand very culturally in tune, as well as speaking to the needs of continent, or partnering with people like Arawa Popi and creating an aesthetic that is used in the brand globally. South African Girl designer. So that's what makes these brands very, very successful in the continent, or for people in the continent to think that they are even from the continent. I mean, Techno is not even sold in China, but it is now the brand to watch in the continent. It's pretty much everywhere else in the continent. And then we come to Botswana, a brand like Olgasi, challenging the brands like Just Do It, like Nike, but just getting on with it and saying that Botswana, and we'll see what you. Then you look at a brand like Botswana. 50 years of Mining Diamonds responsible in terms of what they're doing in the continent and in the country, and where they're headed. So the top 10 brands perceived to be African but are not African: Coke, Nike, Techno, Nestle, Adidas, Vlisco, Samsung, Vodacom, Airtel, Guinness. Africans think they are African because of how they approached, I guess, their marketing and their engagements, and perhaps how they respond to some of the challenges in the continent. I think the way they do it, as we like to say, brand leadership, is they think locally and they act globally. So, when we were all growing up and going to business schools, they taught us to think globally and to act locally. We don't think that's how you build a great African brand or even a global brand in Africa. To build a great global brand in Africa, you must think locally, understand the local insights, and then deliver to the international standard. So what are the rankings for the continent and for Botswana? Let's go ahead. First up, looking at the top 100 brands in the continent. Number 1, Nike. number one brand in the continent. If you look at the top 10 in the continent, Nike, Adidas, Samsung, Coca-Cola, Tecno, Apple, MTN, Puma, Gucci, and Airtel. MTN, the only brand in the top 10. But overall, as I said, 13% of the top 100 brands in the continent, which are admired by Africans, are not made in Africa, are made in Africa, only 30%. So and when you ask them the specific questions, what are the most admired African brands? Well, I said earlier, you either ask them directly or you don't mention it. If you don't mention it, and you just go through the list of the top 100, you'll see MTN, Dangote, Ambessa, Glow, DSTV are top 100, the top African brands. If you ask them to specify an African brand, you'll see Dangote, number one, MTN, number two. You see how they swap positions. And DSTV goes all the way up as an enabling brand. And then there's Azam rising. We see you, Azam. Then we ask them a question about the most admired financial services brand. When you ask them about that, top 25, 72% of the brands are in the top 25 are made in Africa. So when it comes to money, the brands are made here. And 16% of them are mobile. Quite interesting. As you can see, some of them are GT, First Bank, Echo, Uber, Absa, FNB, Standard, Access, Bank of Africa, and Zenith. So those are the top 10. Then we go to the media brands. When we go to the media brands, out of the top 25, 76%, it's almost the opposite, isn't it, of the money. When it comes to the money, 3/4 are African. When it comes to the news, to who tells our story, 3/4 is not African. 12% of them are mobile and 16% are in the digital social space. You can see the brands. BBC always does well, consistently. But I'm still we can relate to some. But to me, what was quite interesting is even a brand like Azam TV, as I said, or a brand like Netflix. Now during the COVID era, where have we been? We've been watching Netflix. So you can imagine how it's risen up the ranks. We've been getting our news on MTN's phone. So that and brands like BBC have always done traditionally well because they've been in the continent for so long, but also they have multiple platforms to reach African consumers, and the BBC World Service has been a standout connector in the continent. Let us talk Botswana. So let's go specific to Botswana's results. So if you look at the Botswana results. The top 3 most admired brands overall. So just speaking overall, we don't say top 10 most admired brands in Botswana. Just overall, we're not asking Botswana brand, we're not asking African brands. We just said the 3 most admired brands are in Botswana. Number 3, Adidas. Number 2, Orcasi. Number 1, Nike. Nike is dominant, as I've said earlier. It's a dominant brand across the continent. It's number 1 even in South Africa, where you would have expected a local brand like MTN or Vodacom to be performing pretty well. But Nike is the number 1 brand. So now we ask, and if you look at the list of the top 10 most admired brands in Botswana, it's a general question. 20% are made in Botswana. So you can see Orcasi at 2 and Choppies at 9. Then when we go to the question of what are the most admired brands made in Botswana? To me, this is quite important because it's really part of trying to understand now from the continent, from the country itself, what are those brands which we can be proud of from our country? BK Procter, Choppies, the number 1 brand in Botswana is Orcasi. What a phenomenal performance! What a phenomenal performance! I think we should be really proud of a brand like this, which took where other national teams have been running to Nike, have been running to Adidas, have been running to Puma in the past to sponsor their team. I remember when Orcasi came about and they said, we will kit our own national team. We are Botswana, so we will kit our thing. Now you can see how they've transitioned the brand, not just from a sport, now it's a sport and lifestyle brand. So accordingly, the most admired brand made in Botswana. Phenomenal performance, very excited about this. For me as a Pan-Africanist and somebody who who champions made in Africa and made in every country in the continent. So you can see the list, the top 10 list. Number 1, Olkasi, Choppies, BK, Mascom, Sand Foods, KBL, Sefalana, Yarona, B-Mobile, I can't see, read for me. Oh, and Blue Crystal, sorry, I couldn't, old age is hitting me now. Blue Crystal, Tsukiri Yako Botswana. So quite interesting, the top 10, the top 10 list in Botswana. I don't know if there are any surprises. I'll be quite keen afterwards, when we engage with Bogolo, to see whether there were any surprises when Losika engages with the rest of the brands, to see if they found it surprising where they performed. Then we asked them the specific question: what are the most admired African brands in Botswana? So now we are focusing just African. We say we use the word African brands in Botswana. And the results. Number 3, Urban Soul. Interesting brand. DSTV. DSTV performs well consistently because it's the brand that brings other brands to us, I guess, from a television. It brings us the channels. It brings us opportunity to connect across the continent. Urban Soul, incredible brand. I read the story about how it came up and the rebranding from Mafia to Urban. Incredible. Number 1 African brand in Botswana, Olkasi. I've told the story of Olkasi. I remain inspired and really excited about what we are capable of as a country and as a continent. And you can see the top 10 most admired African brands: Olkasi, DSTV, Blue Crystal, BK, Blue Crystal, MTN, BK, sorry. ShopRite, Botswana, Kaizer Chiefs, and Bogolo. I was quite interested when I saw Kaizer Chiefs, as I said earlier, and of course even more so Bogolo. I thought Botswana would go Botswana, but I see but a great opportunity there for us as a country and as a continent. Most admired brands. So now we said media. Now we just want to talk media. From a media perspective, Voice, BTV, Duma. How interesting. Duma. Never heard of Duma. Never heard of Duma. But when I look at the research in Botswana, Duma seems to be performing well consistently. You can see Duma, BTV, Voice, BTV, Yarona. And of course, the most admired top brand media in Botswana is Yarona. So it's that question, that same question you said earlier, that Yarona is the most admired brand out of the top brands in Botswana. But when you just ask the specific question about media, Duma. So you got Yarona and Duma performing as the 2 most admired media brands. Then from financial services, number 3, Mascom. I told you Mascom, it's financial services. Letsego. Number 1, Botswana Life. Interesting, beautiful brand. So I love this brand. If you want to look at it as like, wow, very cool brand. Botswana Life, and how appropriate that it is named Botswana Life. So if you look at the list, the 2 brands there, Botswana Life in the top 10, Letsego and Mascom are coming at 21 at the bottom. So top 3 Botswana brand, Mascom, Letsego, and Botswana Life, Letsego, Mascom. Then to close, the most admired listed brand in Botswana, Choppies. So what we do when we look at the most admired, we look at from the list, top 10 from the Africans, 2 collectively, we look at it on the markets, on the stock exchange, Choppies is the most admired brand. That brings us to the end of the lists of the most admired brands in Botswana. So to just to recap, as I've said, number one brand is Olkasi. The two media brands, Yarona, Spontaneous Mention, Duma, Prompted Mention, Botswana Life, Financial Services, and finally Choppies. Congratulations to these brands, but congratulations as well to a lot of the brands which are rising up, which are rising up. And I said earlier, we do this for an important reason. We do this to try and understand how we are performing as Africans, and even us Botswana locally, how we are rising up the ladder and creating brands that Botswana can relate to. To that, I'm looking forward to a conversation with Bogolo, and to tell Losika kana bua ke ntse ke bua.
Thank you.
Technology.
Wire. But thank you so much, Thebe. This was very insightful, and I don't know if there were any surprises there. And with regards to Kaizer Chiefs, we have our own really big football brand, which is a rival to the team that I grew up supporting, Nil Desperandum, but the team is called Township Rollers. And these are the brands that we really would like to see make it on the top 100 Africa list, and definitely onto Botswana's top 10. Amongst all the stardom that I'm surrounded with, I actually didn't get a chance to introduce myself. I'm your host today, Losika Seboni. I'm a lawyer, I'm a marketer, former comedian, and yeah, into brand development, and I'm really excited to be a part of this phenomenon. I've also got a career in marriage and raising teenagers. Well, you and Bogolo have no experience, so.
But Losika, I think you've done a good job. I think you've done a good job with both your careers. You know, together we've traveled this journey together. With the rebranding of UB many years ago, and I've seen those teams of yours that you brought up very well. But I've always been a fan of Footprints, and I think you've done a phenomenal job.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to get into an engagement where Honorable Bay and Thebe are going to get into conversation. So yeah, we've seen and heard Bogolo on economics and Bogolo on money. Or Bogolo on how to run government, but now we're talking with Bogolo on brands. Thank you so much for honoring the stage, and we're happy to have you here as a Botswana brand and an export to Africa and indeed the rest of the world. Those of you who are tuned in, there'll be a portion for you to have a question and answer session with Thebe, Bogolo, and myself. But yeah, without further ado, Thebe, I hand over to you, Kenewendo, from Kenewendo Advisory.
Bogolo dumela.
Dumela Thebe, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I am Mariga ko Botswana today.
Ela go serame.
I know you've got questions for me, but I also have some questions for you. And
Yeah.
do you mind if I ask the first question to you?
No, you can shoot.
But I want to, before I go into my first question, are you surprised at these results though?
Not necessarily. I think some of what we're seeing here is expected. I mean, I actually commented that the most admired listed brand being Choppies is not a surprise at all, because it has really swept through the country, and we've seen its expansion across the continent. So there's really no surprise. And most of us put a few pulas when it was listed a few years ago.
So if you put some pullers in there, Bogolo, we need to talk. Because maybe we can pass on, you know, with the COVID decimating all economies, we'll talk to you about some of those pullers. My real first question to you is, what do you think is the economic significance of growing these local brands like Bo Choppies, like Bo Olkasi and all those? We are frozen. Bogolo, can you hear me? Bogolo? Bogolo, we are frozen. Can you hear us, Bogolo? No, but we stuck, so it's frozen. Should we reconnect again so that we can oops. Sorry, I realized I've been on mute. So can we get this presentation? Yes, the presentation will be available on YouTube. For those who didn't hear me, I apologize. Presentation will be available. And second, the research was part of the big research across the continent that was carried out. Was over 7,500 respondents, 27 countries, representing 80% of the 80% of the continent. Frozen Big Thebe has a mute on his side. I've removed the mute. I apologize. Losika will come back in a minute. And can everybody hear me now? So any other questions? More questions coming up? Go to the question. Everybody can hear me. Excellent. Thank you. Let me just check with you with my technical for 1 second. Lametto's got a question. Let me speak to Lametto in the meantime. Lametto, you've got a question for me. Lametto Piri, you've got a question? Rachile, you've got a question for me. Rachile, you've got a question, happy to answer? Rachile, we can't hear you. Na bi mobile reader ko Botswana. I've got other questions here. Did you measure whether African brands did business with each other, like Olkasi sponsoring Botswana national team? Do you have such examples? No, we did not check whether they do business with each other, but I think as Bogolo will speak later, intra-Africa trade is a very important initiative. The new Africa Free Trade Agreement is a very important initiative to enable just that for brands to be able to travel the continent and to move borders. How do we get to build brands from Africa to be power brands? As in, what's it lacking? I think, to me, it's investment, it is research, it is benchmarking. Make sure that we are working to the global standard, and that we understand African consumers, because all great brands are about three things. Do you understand the consumers? Do you have a value proposition that speaks to their particular needs? Are you able to deliver to them in an integrated way? Where can I find more information on African brands? Go to brand.africa. So go to brand, www.brand.africa. What were the main reasons behind the admiration? Oh, I don't know. We ask consumers what they admire, and they tell us what they admire. We didn't really probe the key driver of why they love us. Why do you think African brands continue to falter? What can they do to entrench their positions? I think the global brands have been here for a long time. So there's a lot of legacy issues. But if you look at research across the continent, Africans invest the least in research. I think less than 2%, whereas countries like China and all those, Africa has less than 0.5%, whereas countries like China and America spend a significant amount of money in research and development. The second one is intellectual property. Africans don't protect the intellectual property. So it's quite important to do that as well. I don't know, do we have Losika back? Not yet. I realized that in the top 10 brands admired in Botswana, utility companies were not part of the list. We don't categorize. We don't categorize. They categorize them as categories. Losika, are you back? I will answer the other questions when we get to it. Losika, are you back?
Yes, we're back. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. We're going to send a complaint letter to Be Mobile.
Nyara ga se bone ke Eskom ya rona mono.
Eskom, we are going to sue them.
Okay, so we can continue. Apologies for the break in transmission. We'll continue with your engagement, Le Kenewendo.
Thank you so much, Losika. Bogolo, I was asking the question that to you, what do you think is the significance of having to grow these local brands? Why is it so important? Or do you think it's important?
Oh, it's certainly important. And I think it's a very good, having locally made brands is a very good indicator of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. It's a very good indicator of how conducive the doing business environment is. And it's a good indicator of how close a country and an economy is to achieving some of the goals such as job creation, export promotion, as well as boosting its local productive capacity. So, it's really interesting to just look at that top 10 of locally made brands, because those are very big brands. And then, of course, one of my biggest surprises was that you have Urban Soul being registered as an African brand and not as a local brand. And I think that also shows our perspective and that we can be able to export some of these products.
Indeed, and you're so right, because somebody asked the question in terms of, asked the question in the chat box earlier, whether there is that trading of brands between borders. So you are so correct that if brands like Urban Soul and all those are perceived as African and Okasi, it means that they can cross borders, when we open up the borders finally. I probably had another, and I probably have another question for you in terms of coming from government earlier, and now being in the private sector again. So you have a good perspective in terms of the regulatory environment. Are governments making it easy in Botswana for brands like Yarona, brands like Blue Crystal, brands and other brands further down? I mean, there were brands like Bokresta, Bokalahadi, breweries, Yarona, Sukiri, which are further down the list. How's the regulatory environment in Botswana?
First, I want to say it's a good thing that you mentioned brands like Yarona Sukiri and Seto, because those are new brands, and they are new products that just hit the market. And what it shows is that they hit the market at record speed, and they were able to market themselves so broadly and so widely and really tap on the market share. And also what it shows is just how easy it has been to start businesses, particularly of that nature, or that there was some sort of support. So we've seen a few reforms happening over the years, of course, in terms of doing business environment. And I think what we can do now is set this particular ranking as a benchmark, and we will see how many new brands enter the rankings next year. And that will be a very good indication to whether it's easy to start a business in Botswana, whether it's easy to grow that business, particularly in manufacturing, and whether it's easy to rival some of those bigger international and domestic, international and African brands. But I also want to quickly note that there are a few other things that can be done to accommodate growth of brands in Botswana and to just boost local productive capacity in general. And some of the people here will remember that last year we were talking a lot about putting more locally made products on the shelves of the retailers. And so the retail charter that the work of it had started really needs to be concluded to ensure that we do see more local brands being in the shelves. Because when they have the shelf space, then people start to resonate with those brands. And it's one of the reasons why Yarona Sukiri has been, Yarona Sugar has been so successful, because it managed to secure the shelf spaces, and its branding, its marketing just ran. So we need to just keep pushing this, and it can also be done through the Trade Act as an example of really asking for local content for maybe 30% or so, and ensuring that our local brands have the visibility that they need in the market. And then there are others that are currently operational, like the Botswana Export Development Program, that can be used to bolster some of our locally made products, not only domestically, but internationally.
It's such, such an important advancements you talk about there. So when I look at a country like Namibia, where we were last week, they also have that initiative where to try and increase or legislate having shelf space in these supermarkets, because you're so right that if we can't buy what we can't see, and we can't compare that which we can't touch.
Absolutely.
So it's so important, but to me, it's always been as well as in terms of what I've always admired about Botswana is just that strong self of identity. Calling a radio station Yarona, calling Yarona Sukiri. So it's a Sefalana. All those brands. It's correct. It's because they say that all great brands or all great progress starts when you know who you are, and to know who you are is embedded so much in the language and the culture. But you must have 10 questions for me, or just one.
I have many questions for you, and first one is just that figure you mentioned, 13 to 14% or so of Africa. Well, let me rephrase that. So I'm really surprised that Africa's share of the top 100 is only about 13, 14%. And I want to understand what that is all about and how we can improve that. And I have a follow-up statement to link it to trade, but I want to understand it from your perspective first.
Well, it's always perplexed me. It's always worried me, and I've always but having looked around now, and as I said, traveling the continent and observing and watching, I've seen people wearing Gucci's, wearing Versace, talking about all the MTVs and all those across the continent, and I say to myself, but 99% of them are all fake. They buy them all from China. They come into the market in China. But But what makes them stand out is because we watch, and you saw 73% of the media channels in the continent that Africans admire are non-African, meaning that we import a lot of the international culture into the continent. And that culture then exposes us to non-African ideas of what it means to have arrived. That's why you see the rap stars in Gucci's, in the Louis Vuitton and all those. So that begins to influence our brand choices. So that's the one side. The second side of it is, I think there's a big problem that we have as Africans across the continent, and it is that lack of self-love. I don't think we love ourselves as much. We don't love who we are. And we are very quick to get rid of our identity, although I think it's beginning to change now. So, Fela Kuti says, you must identify with Africa, then you have an identity. And if you have that identity, you are able to apply that identity or to choose things which reflect who you are. Because brands are supposed to reflect our choices and reflect who we are. And I think, to me, that is probably the second fundamental problem that we have. Third one is probably Third one is probably more a technical one, and I was beginning to mention it on the chat box, which is the issue about research and development. We don't spend enough money in research and development. Second, intellectual property. We don't own our ideas. And sometimes when we do come up with our ideas, when we do come up with our own Tusker beer, then we sell it out. Then it's no longer ours. Or Castle, we sell it out, then it's no longer ours. And third, I think most important, we really need to do something in terms of creating an enabling regulatory environment to support these brands.
Right. Certainly. I mean, when I said earlier that from my perspective, from an international trade perspective, it makes sense. You will not believe that intra-African trade is actually sitting at 12 to 13%. So your figures of branding of African brands in the top 100 actually make sense, and it goes well with those figures. And we're hoping that that will change as we increase our intra-African trade through the AFCFTA that we spoke about the other day. So I have another question for you in relation to Olgasi that we're also proud of. It's number one in Botswana, but it's also in the top 10 of top 100 African brands. And I want to know, what is it that this brand is doing so well and that we can share with other up and coming brands in Botswana that wish to find themselves in that top 100?
I think, and I'll be very happy to engage with them later to hear the story further. But I think they were able to tap in to the identity of what it means to be Botswana and what it means to be made in Botswana. They were also able to sell the idea that a Botswana or a Botswana brand can deliver up to that high standard, global standard. I think they also had the guts to go to Botswana National Football Association and say, we are ready to compete and we can kit the national team. That confidence, that quality, and that identity with Botswana, I think, to me, that was so important. When I used to go to international trade, international advertising awards in places like Cannes and London, I was always quite astounded that when you go to those international awards and you look at what is being awarded, what is generally being awarded, the stuff that wins from Italy comes from Italy and speaks to Italian, has got an Italian aesthetic. The French, the stuff that wins from France has got a French aesthetic and a French chutzpah, if you will. The stuff that comes from UK or Britain, the same. But the stuff that comes from Africa wants to be like Britain, wants to be like Italy, wants to be like France. Instead of saying that we are African and this is how we behave. I must tell you, in this continent, the one country that seems to do that a bit better, Nigeria. Watch those beautiful ads from Nigeria, particularly the ads from Glo and Airtel from Nigeria. They tap into that. That's what I think it takes.
But I completely agree with you about this. We have a lot of pride. We should love ourselves more. And I wanted to relate into economic value. I keep saying, if we're just saying we're proud to be Botswana, but we're not making money circulate a lot more within Botswana, then we are truly not proud, because I should make Losika rich, he should make me rich, and we should make each other rich here by circulating the pula a little bit longer in Botswana. And so I have a last question for you here. Actually, two last questions. One is, what do you think our local institutions should do to support some of these brands? You know, like you talked about BFA earlier with Olga C, and I want to get your thoughts on more on that. And then, which local brands have you supported, without putting you on the spot, that you think have the chance, or they have what it takes to make it into the top 100 next year?
Oh, such difficult questions you're asking me. The first one, I think is easy. The first one is easy, and this is why it's easy. Why it's easy is what local institutions need to do. They really need to walk the talk. You cannot say that you are building the country or you are building the economy when you are externalizing opportunities, one, and on the other side, you are not supporting local brands or local businesses as well. Because remember, behind every great brand is a great business. And why is it so important to build, to support them? Because when you invest in the businesses, when you make it easy to do business, make it easy to get to market, you are creating jobs for the country. You are retaining, you're able to raise taxes, and those taxes come back as revenue to the country, and you're able to use those revenues to build public goods that we require. So the institutions need to understand that correlation, but I think somehow they don't understand the correlation, because many African institutions, they think that it's better to make it easy for Coca-Cola to do business in Africa, but they will not take that same attitude to a local brand or local business, because they find the local business to be a nuisance. If you go to a country like Rwanda, which I find fascinating out of interest, there was a lot of importation of second-hand goods, clothing, if you remember, the textile. Yes. Whereas the textile industry was dying, as it's dying everywhere else in the continent. So what did Excellency Kagame do? Excellency Kagame and the Rwandans, they said, we are stopping the importation of second-hand clothing. We are allowing Rwandans to be able to make their own clothing here in Botswana, or rather we're enabling the textile industry here in Botswana. So I think that's what they need to do as a continent. If you look at what brands should be up there, so when I look down the list on this, and I've stated this place many times.
Bubbling under, yes.
I've stated a brand like Cresta, for example, and if you look at some of the great brands in the continent, why did Marriott have to come down to South Africa, to Africa, and buy up all the Protea properties? When a brand like Cresta, which is in Botswana, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, should be really playing in that space. That's what we really need to be doing. We need to be investing in brands like that, because one thing that we've learned in the continent is that tourism is a big driver. If you look at a country like South Africa, 10% of the GDP, you go all the way up to Seychelles, that goes, and Mauritius, that goes up into the 30-40% contribution to GDP. And what you need for that, you need local products. Products like the Crestas and many others.
Kevin, I think there's a Esmokobi that's really destroying our conversation. They are chatting. If I could ask them to please mute the mic so that they are not interrupting our conversation, we would
agree entirely.
Name is Sandra.
Oh,
say Sandra.
Sandra, please. Okay, so you were still giving us. You talked about Cresta. Is there any other, maybe two more brands that you saw bubbling under in your list?
You want people to say that I'm biased. And next year when the brand is up there, you want people to say, how did you get there? You spoke about it last year.
No, just so that I don't compromise you. so that I don't compromise you, I will say I had the greatest pleasure to work with a lot of young and ambitious brands, and I would like to see them on this list next year. The likes of, oh my God, it just disappeared. Basaro, come on. Setso, there we go. The likes of Setso, everyone here had blanked. I don't know why. The likes of Setso, I'd like to see them on there. And if we're also looking at technology, because that's where we're going in during this time of COVID, and I believe that's where the economy will go post COVID, then I want to see Agri on there next year, because they are doing fantastic work, and they also have a communications platform. And I want to see there are so many brands that I would like to see.
Stageworks Africa.
Stageworks. But also, I think it would be worth while considering some individual brands, because I believe we have a lot of talent here in the creative arts that will also need to be profiled. And earlier, when you were talking about local institutions, you know, investing in our own instead of looking outwards, I was thinking of comedians, of musicians, of films that are being produced here and are not being given the same stage. And we need to actively and decisively invest in those to ensure that growth, because that growth can only be determined by us and our little poolers being put back into those sectors. So now, Thebe, from my side, I have asked you all the questions I want. Do you have any more for me?
No. I just want to correct you. There's no such thing as little Pula. Pula is stronger than Rand.
I mean,
and my late grandfather will not appreciate Pula. It's a little Pula. Pula has always been.
Pula is strong. My ancestors know it. So it means, you know, good tidings are coming upon us. Yeah.
Excellent. Back to Losika.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Losika.
Thank you so much, Bogolo, for your focus on Africa and speaking about some of these brands that we admire. And we really want to see more of our Botswana brands on the top 100 Africa list. We're a small nation, but we pack a punch. Do we not all agree? So thank you. We'll see you a little later offline on the award ceremony. And I would like to engage with some of the brands that have made it onto Botswana's top 10 list, and engage with one or two of them just to be able to ask them one or two questions about how they view their win. And yeah, we really thank a lot of you for staying tuned onto this program. It's really important for our country, and it's important for our brands. Thank you, Kenewendo.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to call Katlego to come and join me on stage. Katlego Gaborone is from Choppies, who have really done well, especially in the space of #1 listed brand and being one of Botswana's top admired brands. And we want to be able to ask her one or two questions. And from your side on some of the things that you have done to remain relevant for so many years. Is Katli here? Please join me on the stage.
Thank you.
Dumela.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Yourself?
Emma, congratulations, because you're one of our big winners here today. Are you surprised that the Choppies brand has made it onto Botswana's top 10?
Well, I'd hate to sound a bit big-headed, but I wouldn't say I'm entirely surprised, because I think Choppies has done a very good job of ensuring that we place ourselves on the map and consistently and continuously, because we're a homegrown brand. And so we pride ourselves in the fact that we're able to be seen by the rest of the world, especially also now being recognized locally as well. So
yeah, it's great. And it's been a bit of a bumpy ride as well, which is why I would have thought, you know, it would have been a surprise. But, you know, for the average Botswana who's on the street, maybe they don't read into too much. And in life, anyone can go through a bumpy ride. Do you think that may have affected the brand in any way?
I'd like to think that anything that may not be positive could potentially affect the brand. However, in terms of how far we've come, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, I think our brand still remains strong. We still remain steadfast in the fact that we will continue to do better and grow better as well. So
that is great stuff. Are there any plans for the future? Or you can't let the cat out of the bag in terms of remaining relevant?
There's always plans for the future. I mean, we certainly want to see ourselves going a little bit more digital, going a lot more online, especially with the current changes that are happening due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so because of that, we're definitely moving along those lines a lot more than we are about having our customers be physically within the stores.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. And we'll see you
so
again
much.
shortly.
Thank you.
Banukata join more staging. We don't want to keep people waiting because we need to go out there and make those big pullers and small rands. One. But we're really, really excited and really happy, Banya. What do you think Okasi has been able to do to be able to appear on that top 100 list? Because even last year when I attended at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, you were number 25 in Africa.
24.
24. Oh, sorry. Hey, that's one beater today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically doing what we said we're going to do, having a plan, pursuing it, and sticking to it all the way. I just shared with Morph and BK now that we really knew what we wanted to do. I remember first thing we submitted a proposal to CEDA. We're a CEDA funded establishment, by the way. And then we submitted a plan like we want to do a brand. So that lady on the other end of the table, was like, what is a brand? So I said, no, we want to do a brand called Okasi. It is a brand from Botswana. It's going to give us identity as Botswana. And we stuck to that story. Even everything that happened along the way, us starting with a lifestyle line and then going to Zebras was all in the plan. Because then we stuck to blue, black, and white, and we were pursuing Zebras by sticking to blue, black, and white. And then we got to Zebras, and Botswana could identify with the blue, black, and white that we now carried to Zebras. So it was just a plan that we had, and we stuck to it, and we're still on it now.
Such a flag carrier brand. Yeah. We want to see you competing in Africa and moving up that list. Are there any plans to become that lion and take a big chunk and a big bite out of Africa?
Definitely. I mean, right now we're talking goodwill, isn't it? Like, and one thing I want to do is thank you guys for being a reflection of our efforts. What this thing does, it gives us feedback on the kind of good work that we're doing and staying at the top forever and the way we're trying to do, because it's not easy, really. We thank guys like you. And the plans that are coming up, there's a big one coming soon. I might as well announce it now, but I'm not going to do it. It's one of the ways that we stay relevant. We want to play in the international platform. And like I've always said, there's really a niche out there for an African brand like ours to play in the world stage. Can I ask you a question now, Mr. Losika? Which brand, if I ask you now, that's coming out of Africa, that's already playing in that international platform?
Would I know?
None of right now you're scratching your head. Exactly, that's the space that you are pursuing.
Let me scratch my head so that people can see that I scratch my head.
You're pursuing, and I want to get there.
Yeah. This, guys, it's a really big round of applause and a big pound for BW and for Okasi for raising the flag, and we're really, really great because you are Botswana's #1 admired brand, and we'll see you as well shortly.
And we want to thank Botswana. I'd like to maybe take a punch. I just discussed it with Morph and BK, like I said earlier, that
Morph and BK about Baba Odisa. Urban Soul.
And I want to make it clear to Botswana that we're not competing with any other brand in Botswana. We are friends, we are together because we want to kick everyone out of Botswana and play in Botswana and play internationally.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And then that's really that.
No, thank you very, very much. And then we'll have a conversation now with Thebe before we conclude. But yeah, thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause, guys.
Thank you very much, guys.
We do have some industry leaders here. Thebe, if you are still with us, I know you engaged in a Q&A. Maybe we can get Bogolo to come back. And with this particular Q&A, are there any questions that our viewers would like to ask Thebe, myself, or Mayor Bogolo Kenewendo.
I can see a question here at the bottom, which is quite interesting. Somebody is saying to me, why are social enterprises not seen as brands? But I think they are seen as brands. I mean, if you look at a brand like M-Pesa is seen as which is a social enterprise in many ways, but it is also seen as a big brand. So social enterprises can be seen as brand. Then there's a question here that says, good day, Thebe and Bogolo J, I think they wanted to say, my question is, in your opinion, what role is marketing playing in shifting brand preferences of our local brands? And then another one, do you see African governments changing corporate monopolies and treaties tied with trading game to empower local and African brands? I'm going to ask Bogolo, I'm going to ask you to answer that one. Do you see African governments changing corporate monopolies? As a former government person, this one, this low-hanging fruit about marketing.
Yeah, I see what you're doing there, but okay. Yeah, I think there is actually a move in the continent generally to grow SMEs. And to be able to play a part in both our value and supply chains. And this has become such a big conversation, particularly now as our supply chains were disrupted by COVID. So the issue now is, how do we ensure that within our borders as a country and our borders as a continent, we are able to be self-sustaining? And so this conversation, I believe that it will start to cultivate some of those disruptions of corporate monopolies. It will start to cultivate SME empowerment and local brand empowerment. And you're starting to see a little bit of that shift when we start talking about unbundled procurement projects, because that's really how you start to support those SMEs if you're putting money into them.
So I'm going to look at other questions here. It says, other than sponsorships, how can corporates help support local brands? Corporates support local brands. I mean, I'm thinking the local brands are going to be the next corporates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think we shouldn't just be talking about sponsorship at all. This is a business and it should be looked at as a business. And as a business, you want to earn your revenue. You don't just want to be dependent on sponsorship. And when you're performing, it's not for sponsorship, it's for payment.
I would like to add something to that as well. Yeah. It's really important, Thebe, as well. I think more partnerships, because for a lot of corporate entities, we're always, as ad agencies, we're always ordering corporate apparel. But we're bringing these things in from South Africa. It's really important for them to be able to have partnerships with the likes of an Urban Soul. It will be really, really great for the employees. These are quick wins to be able to have some of, our banks and corporate entities having all Kasi apparel. It will really do a lot for the country.
Yes.
Losika, I think you must answer this. I think Losika must answer this question. It says, in the case of Botswana, what efforts are being put in place to promote branding? And then on the left, and then Bogolo is e-commerce showing some signs of growth in Botswana. So Losika, what efforts are in place to promote branding in Botswana?
I think with the advent of digital, really companies are really into the promotion of brands. They realize brand equity, which is something that was a bit alien to our market. And really with more education, we're having marketing managers who are able to influence the executive management to be able to understand that they need to invest in their brands and partner with other local brands. So there's a step in the right direction in that regard.
Bogolo, and I see one e-commerce.
All right. Yeah, certainly we are seeing a growth slow, but growth in e-commerce in Botswana. Even the policies are slowly shifting. I mean, we started the e-commerce and digital strategy last year. which actually looked at creating a platform that could provide security to entities that wanted to sell online and digitally, but didn't trust. And that is one of our main issues here. The security around our credit cards is still not that strong, and we still need to work around it. And, it calls for the support and partnership of entities like the Bankers Association of Botswana, Bank of Botswana, and as well as all of the businesses here to want to invest in e-commerce. But fortunately, I will tell you, last week, I have never seen so many ads for we deliver alcohol at home. Okay.
My people.
Home deliveries, order by phone, WhatsApp, and online. I think the ban of alcohol has really just spurred the growth of e-commerce in Botswana. So
that's how you win.
I'm hoping that it really ripples to other products. I mean, we've had a few platforms that have existed, some of which we were fortunate to send to the Alibaba campus last year, and we will be sending some more with a private partnership later on this year. If things open, stop laughing.
No, I know the big news, but I'm not gonna let the cat out the bag.
I think we need to bring it to a close from my end. But
yes.
Bogolo, we really must get together again.
Absolutely.
And let's take this further. Let's take this further practically. Looking at the questions that have been brought up in terms of intra-Africa, how do we move this brands across borders? How do we build Botswana brands? Let's take this further, and with you, Losika, as well. And then the question about what's been done to promote branding in Botswana, I think this is what we're doing. This is exactly the point. What we're doing here, we are putting it out there, and we are putting a metric that people can now compare and say, who's doing it right, who's not doing it right, and how are we doing as a country, and how we're doing compared to the rest of the country. So from my end is really congratulations to the brands that have come to the top. I think just to be mentioned in the top 10, to me, that's incredible recognition, because there's so many, out of 2 million people or so, to stand out, to be able to stand out, to me, it is incredible accomplishment. And Bogolo, as always, you bring such fresh perspective and insight to engagements. And Losika, to me, you're one of the finest marketers I know that I've come across in my time. For my end, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to deliver this in Botswana. I'll tell you this much: you have redefined the standard of how this in-country must be delivered in the blended virtual and like you really put pressure next to put in Nigeria and
so the Niger man better be ready. So
the Nigerians are it's not up to the same standard. Well done.
Thank you so much. Well,